MLB offseason is here. We have a shocking new report regarding the Phillies' status about one of the top international free agents in the sport. With Ranger Suarez's future uncertain, could the Phillies be seeking for another pitching addition? And could Dave Dombrowski be seeking the overseas market? I do want to break down what is being reported, why this makes basically zero sense to me, and why I think the biggest story here is not about the player directly, but the foundation that is being attempted to be laid. So let's dive into things here. I do want to start off with this report here coming from MLB Network, which tweets out that Japanese star Tetsuya Ime will reportedly be posted for MLB teams next week, and at the Real DV reveals which teams are interested according to his sources. And what those teams were exactly is that the finalists are the Yankees, the Phillies, the Blue Jays, the Mets, and the Padres. Now, obviously, that is a lot of teams being listed there, but the Phillies are in the mix, and I do think that's notable here. Now, do I think the Phillies are going to make a key addition on the international market? No, I do not think that it's going to be the case. But do I think that they are going to intentionally be in the mix for all these rumors, make connections, talk to as many people as possible? 100%. That is a market that they're trying desperately to get in the mix for. And I'm not just talking out of my, the back of my head here, that we have some concrete proof. And why I say that directly is we also got news that from Japan, the Phillies attempted to sign Japanese prospect right-hander Yuma Masaki to a minor league deal. But once Masaki was drafted in the 6th round of the NPB draft, he chose to sign with the Selbu Lions. The Phillies remain active in Japan. And another example of that is just earlier this offseason, just about a month ago, that we got the news that the Phillies are holding tryouts for pitchers in Japan. Selected participants will attend a private showcase and could be offered a minor league contract. The Phillies have recently increased their presence in Japan, led by international scouting director Derek Chung. And the full article there, and then it writes, this is the third straight offseason that the Phillies have been heavily involved in the Japanese market. Last offseason, the Phillies signed their first Japanese player directly from the NPB, Koya Aogi. He was released in July after struggling in the minor leagues. And for Koya directly, I had some high hopes. He was a submarine thrower, a relief pitcher there, and a guy that I was excited about. I would love it if the Phillies could find an electric submarine arm out of the bullpen there. I think that's sick when they do play in the right direction, but easier said than done. There are not a lot of them on the market at this point. But I do think the point that is to take away from the entirety of this video is the Phillies are going to desperately try to climb into the overseas and international market there. There is a ton of talent. Now, the number one thing that I think is important to note, and why I don't have a ton of optimism for this coming together, is there's just a direct geographical disadvantage the Phillies are never going to be able to overcome. There's a reason that they all funneled to the Dodgers. That's where Shohei Ohtani ends up. And I know, of course, he started in the Angels, but even a guy, like, looking at all these different options and people that do ultimate, Yoshibu Yamamoto, like, that is a dude that the Phillies offer directly more money. But because of the geographical advantage, because of the situation, the foundation that they had laid as far as the support system, that's the guy that he elected to take his talents to Los Angeles. Now, with all that being said, you have to get that foundation laid themselves, and the Phillies are trying desperately to do this. If you can start to create this ecosystem where it is a friendly transition process for these international talents, that's something that does make a lot of sense, and they obviously do not want to miss out on the next Shohei Ohtani or Yamamoto or any of those names that you do want to drop to. There's a ton of talented players over there playing baseball right now that the Phillies should be seeking to get access to, but it is easier said than done. Now, the other reason that I don't think this holds a lot of weight to me is the fact that he is a starting pitcher. The Phillies have plenty of starting pitching conversations of their own, starting right at the top with Ranger Suarez. And I do think all signs are pointing to he unfortunately will not be back with the Philadelphia Phillies. And why I say that directly is we know that this is the time for Ranger Suarez to capitalize on his market in its entirety. That this is his time where he's hitting free agency, ready to make the biggest contract of his career, and has stacked the deck in his favor to make sure that is the case. And what I mean by that is hiring Scott Boras as his agent. And Boras is taking his victory laps, throwing out his nonsense quotes, which absolutely drive me crazy. And when speaking about Ranger Suarez directly in this category, is Scott Boras says about Ranger Suarez, quote, "There's no doubt that anyone that looks at the playoffs the last 3-4 years, that Suarez playoffs quality is, well, frankly, the Lone Ranger in that category." And yes, that does make me nauseous just reading that right there. But Ranger is that dude that we're talking about just this season with Ranger Suarez directly, pitching 26 games, a 60% win-loss percentage there, through 157.1 innings, allowed 14 home runs, 151 strikeouts, and just 154 hits. Comes out to a 3.2 ERA, a 1.220 whip, and for Ranger directly, he's never going to be a pitcher that the stats quantify how good that he really is. That you cannot really measure just the stones that that guy has. That you throw him in any situation, and he is not blinking at the opportunity there. That sure, he's not going to be Cy Young caliber stats there. He's not going to be Zack Wheeler. He's not going to be Paul Skeens. He's not going to be Christopher Sanchez there. But Ranger Suarez is a guy that I trust with my life on the line if I need him to get through an inning there, and it is going to break my heart. Now, the reason that I do think that he's going to be walking here pretty much purely comes down to money. And when we dive into the contract predictions here, that Jim Bowden is predicting that Ranger Suarez is going to get a 6-year, $164 million deal. When you factor in the amount of money that the Phillies have invested in the pitching position already, we're talking about Zack Wheeler being the highest paid pitcher in baseball, excluding Shohei Ohtani, of course, here. We're talking about Aaron Nola has been paid, is going to be with this organization for plenty of years beyond this. Christopher Sanchez looked like a legitimate Cy Young caliber pitcher. He finished second in voting this year in that category there. Andrew Painter is a huge part of this conversation for what is the vision for him. Is he going to be in the rotation right from day one? Jesus Luzardo earned his stripes with this Phillies team last year. Those are 5 names right there when just speaking about things. And are you going to pay that level of money for a guy who is going to be a back end of the rotation guy? His caliber of talent is above that, but that's where he fits in to this Phillies pitching staff as a whole. Now, Ranger is like, from a personal standpoint, he's my favorite pitcher out of all those guys that I listed here. And the thing that I'm really hoping for here is I can understand the writing on the wall is he's probably not going to be back in Philadelphia. I just hope he goes somewhere where we can still like happily root for Ranger. Like if he's scooped up by like a Mets or a Dodgers or a team like that, which I don't think is going to happen, it would break my heart. Go to the Chicago Cubs or an American League team, please. An AL team would be sick, so we can be Ranger Suarez fans from afar. And for Ranger directly, I do think in an ideal world, he would love to stay in Philadelphia. That's all he's expressed throughout the season. Speaking about how this is his hometown club, this is all he wants to play for. And it is a bummer that this is the timing for how things work out. But I think what really cemented this was the decision to trade for Jesus Luzardo last offseason. If that move was not made by Dave Dombrowski, I think we're going to have an entirely different tone on this whole situation. But I think that was the Ranger replacement at the time. And this season only cemented that belief. And I think for Dave Dombrowski, that there is this weirdness in for Ranger directly. His velocity has dipped over the past 3 years and a pretty consistent rate, and he does have an injury history. So he's not a red flag list pitcher, but I still trust his stuff. And he's never been a guy whose skill is predicated on raw velocity there or blowing it by guys. He's just a calculated pitcher that sets up. It's trickery. It's tough to pick up. So I still believe in Ranger. I think he's going to have a great career beyond this, but I do not think it's going to happen in Philadelphia. So we'll see what happens from here. I do respect the Phillies' opportunities for continuing to attempt to carve out a niche in the Japanese markets and overseas markets as a whole. I think this is a worthy pathway to continue trying to carve out, but I think the long-term effects are going to be far more notable than the short-term here. For the time being, I think it's going to be a lot of rumors, the Phillies connected to names, and not really pen-hitting paper in any specific situation. Probably this offseason and potentially a couple more beyond this, but who knows? It just takes one to change that, and money does talk. Like as much as there is the geographical differences there, if the right player does pop to the market here and the Phillies can come to the proper terms, maybe there is a different story. So we'll see how things shape out, but that is my feel on things, that this is a little bit more buzz and news in an intentional manner by this Phillies team, and I do unfortunately think the writing is on the wall for Ranger Suarez suiting up somewhere else next year. So let me know what you guys think in the comments about all this. Appreciate you guys for tuning into this video as always. We will see what happens for the rest of this offseason. We got a ton more to break down right here on Phillies Digest, so the best way to be keeping tabs is by making sure you're hitting that subscribe button below. Drop a like on this video here. I'll be back. Talk with you next time. Peace.